All right, so we're diving in. This is Devs Who Can't Code. What is this, episode 4 now?
Yes.
I think that's right. Episode 4. And we are extending from episode 3 because we are trying to do something bigger. We're trying to do a bigger project, and we also want to specifically work out all of the details for kind of the strategy and the structure of building something where the AI, as Hope, as you were just saying before we got into this, is that the AI is only good at making little bricks. And what we need to do is set up a structure. If we want to build something big with AI, we need a structure and a strategy of how to refer to things within our app and within the code so that it's always giving us a full brick. And if we want to change something later, or we need to refer to some item from somewhere else, that it doesn't screw up a bunch of bricks at once. We need the AI to not be confused, and we need to be able to put this together literally like a bunch of little bricks so that we can build a house. And all those bricks are isolated, and they know where to go in order to get the important information that it needs to execute its little task or its little function, or to display the right color or the right gradient and that sort of thing. And that these things aren't disparate and spread out all over the place. So, again, that's a difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing to do, and it's very, very easy to run into a situation where the AI gives you out some result or spits out some sort of error that, because it can't see the entire thing and its limitations in context, is that the answer is just nonsense. And if you don't know how to code, as again Hope was just saying to me, is that if you don't know how to code, you're not really going to know how to fix it, and the AI won't really be able to guide you out of that. So, Hope, why don't you give us the breakdown of what we were just talking about, basically? Like, so what's the problem here?
So basically, I feel like if you're watching this and you're still on board, I'm glad that you're finding some value out of this. By the way, but you probably have already tried to build things with AI and gotten frustrated and realized it's still the technology isn't there yet. The problem that we're running into, I think, the more AI progresses, is that the fundamental limitations of LLMs are becoming more apparent. The fundamental limitations of the technology, where it's not an actual human being. Like, it can't see where you're coming from. It can't stand next to you and look at what you're doing, because it knows literally everything pretty much about open source code. It can't empathize with you in a way that it can break these things down in a way that you can understand. So what happens is there's like a communication loop that can go bad, that can just completely kill a project. If you ever get a little bit lost and then the AI gets a little bit lost, there's no going forward from there. So I think it's important for people to realize and not buy into the hype that AI is going to become the next version of humans, and really meet it where it's at and understand it. It's like us. I think Sun Tzu said, like, you need to know yourself and know your enemy. But in this case, you need to know yourself and your programming bot. The bot can build little bricks. You tell the bot the shape and size of a little brick, and it can build that little brick. This is a brick builder. You can't treat it like it's a home builder. It builds the bricks, and then the bricks become the home. It's still on you as the human brain, the human critical thinker, to figure out what you want your house to look like and how to fit those bricks together. And then once you have that plan, then you start telling the AI to build the plan brick by brick. Especially if you can't code and you want to use modern technology to build apps without learning how to read documentation and all that, you're going to need to have those critical thinking skills. You're going to have to build the abstract of whatever you want to build. And so that's what we're trying to build. Like with the last episode, we went into Draw.io and we were building diagrams and stuff, it might sound super confusing. It might seem super verbose, like adding all these letter tags or whatever. The reason for that is I want to give you a scalable method that will work no matter what you want to build, which means you might want to build something that's so, once you actually think about it and put it on paper, is so complicated that by the time you finish the diagram, you don't even remember how the diagram started. And so when you get into situations like that, which for programming is incredibly common, it happens almost every project you undertake when you're building actual stuff. These letter acronyms suddenly become very useful and make the whole project much simpler. So as we progress with building out the diagram for our project, please don't be intimidated. I swear it's going to make a lot of sense and it's going to be very simple as it all ties up. But I think we should also take a step back and just explain what this process is. And so I hope that we could do that this episode so that you have more trust in it, in the process.
Gotcha. All right. So, since you're basically teaching this to me as we go through this, where should I start? Should we go back to the diagram that we finished out with last episode?
What do you think, Guy? You're kind of the guinea pig here.
I'm the guinea pig here.
Do you feel more comfortable just resuming what we were doing, or did you want to?
Well, I think in like what we were talking about just before this is thinking about the global state, and maybe I would need to reference the diagram that we put together in order for this. So as I understand the strategy here is we're trying to figure out which pieces are going to be the little bricks exactly, and then what details or specific information or characteristics like color and like these things will be in a sort of global state, a sort of master list that get referred to, kind of like a config file for a lot of things in an application, and then you can change the configuration, and then everything that the application is using, it refers to the configuration. So anything that's referring to that one detail is you change just the config file, and then all the plugins now reference a different location. It's like where you put your model files or something in Automatic 1111, like in an AI thing. Is if you move the model to a different folder, you don't want your animated diff plugin, and you don't want your face swap plugin and everything to have a different detail for where the model is. You want them to reference a single file, and then you can update that single file, and then all of your plugins, all of the things inside of the application know there's a new location for it.
Yes.
And so we're trying to do that a little bit on steroids, where we have a global state of everything that, and especially because AI can now have like a really big context window, or a much larger context window, is that, we can build these little bricks, and as much detail and as much little bits of information as necessary will be in the global state, so that that global state can be individually changed, and you don't have to change a bunch of pieces of stuff. Like, you just change that one file, and then it updates everywhere it is referenced or called back to from the hundreds of little bricks, thousands of little bricks maybe, that we have in this much larger application. Am I getting that right?
Yes. So the three main parts of the diagram are one, the startup, the foundation, which that's the foundation is something that I've already figured out with the boilerplate, which we'll be releasing. I think it's already public, but the starting point is the same every time. I already built it for you. We're from the code standpoint, we're going to be starting from the same place every time, and that starting point is free and open source. So we will expect that you'll be using the same exact starting point. So that's the first part, the foundation. The second part of this method is the global state. All the data that travels between different components, we need to figure out the whole totality of the app, figure out all of the data that's going to be traveling between components, and we need to put all that data in one file. The reason for that is the whole point of being able to make things without being able to code is to make sure that every AI answer that you get is just copy paste. You don't have to go in and alter files.
Mhm.
In order to do that, we need to make sure that all the data moving around is in its own separate spot. So that way, when we get to the third part, which is all the components, the component pile, every time we're going to reference a bit of data that needs to travel between components, we're going to let the AI know, take this attribute from the global state and put that here. And we're going to be doing that for every component. So with this method, it might not be like the prettiest, it might not be the fastest, most optimal way of building. But in theory, you should be able to build whatever you can think of using this method.
Gotcha.
There will be shortcomings, things that have poor documentation and little open sourcing. I think over the next 10 years, the legality of open source code and training AI and all that is going to shift a little bit. So I wouldn't bank too hard on, no matter what random package you find, being able to use it with AI. I wouldn't bank on that too hard. This is going to work best with things that are used open source often by a lot of people. So yeah, that is a shortcoming. And then also being able to run this on your phone and everything. I do want to get to that eventually, but for this first series project, this is going to be just a desktop app. So that's another limitation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, did you hear that Macintosh said, and I think it was in the pair community group on Keat, that there's going to be some new tools very, very soon for builders to build very easily on top of mobile and stuff like that. I'm pretty jazzed. I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm excited about that too, but I think I'm gonna have to rebuild our starting point though, which is a good thing, obviously. But
we've only done that like what, 4 times?
Well, we're trying to integrate with a emerging technology, so it's kind of expected.
That's par for the course. All right, well, in that, maybe we just go through a global state and we think about this app again. And I'll give a rundown of the app again in my mind. And, or as it is in my mind, as I'm trying to build this. And we go through, like, what would the global state include? And just think about, like, okay, what are all the pieces of this app? You know, like now that we have the draw IO, or do you think we're ready at this stage to go through and just try to make a master list, a kind of global state list of like all the things that will be changing?
I think step 1 is to just figure out every component that we're going to need. Gotcha. Which could sound kind of dry and verbose.
But necessary.
But every little thing has a signet, like changes the file. So if we're going to be building this in such a way that all the programming just consists of Control Z or Control C and Control V, we're going to need to know it's like every menu we want to add. We need to figure out every prompt there. And if it's a settings menu, I think it's safe to assume every single setting there is going to go in the global state. So I would recommend that we don't have to build up the design and what it's going to look like. We just got to say, like, we're going to have a button to add files, and then we're going to need a list for all those files to go in. We're going to need a block that's going to hold other blocks that are going to represent the different files. We got to go through and just basically list those out.
Okay. All right, then I've got log.
We could start
open.
with having like a global state list, and then just tack things onto that as we go.
That is literally what I have open right now.
Okay, that's good.
All right. So let me share. All right. Global state list. This is,
Yes, we want 3 main components. I'd say we have the global state which like for the H1s, I'd say global state and component tree. And then for like the more complex components, we might want to put those in double brackets to link to other notes. If that makes sense.
What were those three components again? Global state list.
Global state list, a component tree.
Component tree. Okay.
And then I would say starting point, but the starting point is kind of not mutable. The starting point will be the same every time.
We'll leave that just like this then to start with.
So
I'll actually leave this as a tab section. All right.
Yes, and then the component tree is just going to be a nested list that contains every component and subcomponent, and then the subcomponents have their subcomponents, and each one of those is going to have data associated with it. Yo, Obsidian is the perfect tool for this, because what you can do is double bracket every bit of data, and then that data can lead to a note, and then that can like link it to the global state list.
Yeah. Logsec and or Obsidian are both perfect for this. This model of like note taking, I feel like. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the original stuff that was put together for these apps was actually designed by a developer for development, if I'm not mistaken.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The things that branched off of this. By the way, if anybody uses Roam Research, ROAM, Logsec, LOGSEQ, which is this guy right here, is basically an open source, completely free version of Roam Research. It's what Athens Research was trying to do, and then I think Logsec just kind of beat them. They got more momentum, and then the Athens project shut down. But I love Obsidian. But the one thing that gets me to continue, that has gotten me on Logsec at the same time, let me just do this, is the fact that I can just drag and drop. Like, is that, well, it's closed source, but honestly, that's not cool. Like a big concern for me. It's the fact that I can just move stuff around, and I can't do that in Obsidian. There was actually a plugin that let me do that in Obsidian, because like each one of these things is kind of like a block. Like it's very much, it treats the text in this interface like a block of code, you know, like a piece of information in and of itself. And that becomes incredibly useful because you see down here, it says unlinked reference with a dash. As soon as I put in hashtag project and hashtag devs who can't code, it attached a note for the devs who can't code, the first episode of the to-do app, as this is relevant to what I'm doing here. So it automatically pulls in other blocks of information that are relevant to what I'm doing. So if I start a note about talking about inflation and I'm trying to come up with an explanation, I'm immediately going to have all of my notes that I've previously written about inflation show up at the bottom, so I can reference stuff. I can pull stuff up that 3 years ago that I wrote down that I completely forgot about. An analogy that I was like, oh my God, that was great. How did I forget that I wrote this? And so this is a fantastic tool for that sort of stuff. For just like, if you're scatterbrained and disorganized like I am, this is a wonderful tool for that sort of thing. This and Obsidian, but this one does it better in my opinion. Just in the way it looks.
I have to try Logsec. I have Obsidian Sync, and so it's sunk cost fallacy, but I didn't even think about it. But this is the perfect tool. Yeah. The relational note taking. This is perfect for the workflow that I'm trying to teach.
Sweet.
Yeah, and I've been using it too for like geopolitics, because that stuff is so like interconnected. It's great for that.
All right. So global state list. All right, let's start with the obvious things. Let me go back to my draw. So I've got a list of apps, list of tiny apps. Like, so these are the scripts. The scripts that we want to execute. Done. We have list of
I might
Let's go
want
back to
to
the draw.
suggest that we link that to its own note, because what is a tiny app? How do we store it? We have to add and remove them. What's that going to be like? And then as a dev who can't code, you're not going to really understand when things become more complicated. So I'd recommend, if you're using this particular software or Obsidian, link every single one of these to its own note. And so that way, especially with the global state lists and the data there, anytime another component, any component, is using it, you can link it to that same note. And so that way, you don't really have to juggle a whole bunch of stuff in your head at once. If that makes sense.
Okay, so this is actually cool. I think I see what you're saying is that I can organize my notes exactly like how the code is going to be organized.
Pretty much.
In that everything's just referencing the other thing, so that we can kind of build our structure like this. So does that mean that I need to be making like acronyms or little code snippets of like what is this item? In fact, I think we did this actually for
not quite. So you know how you brought up the unlinked references? We want to use a feature like we want to have a system that's similar to that.
We want to utilize.
So let's say we have. I'm going to go back to the color example because I think that's really straightforward. We have a color, and on its own, that's just a fucking word, or sorry, freaking word, but it's going to be what we're specifically referencing is the background color of a given component. So if we just say in the global state we add color, and then we link the color to its own note, then every time we reference that specific attribute in all of the components, which could end up being like 100 different components, we won't remember individually every single data point. We won't remember it. So instead, we should, every time we put that color in a component, it should link to the same note that we created in the global state. So that way, when we're creating the global state component, which is going to be a single file, we just go to the global state and we just see every component. And if there's we go to the global state and we see every bit of data. And if there's a bit of data that references a bunch of components, we know what goes in the global state. And then if we add to the global state and we see that it's only used by one thing, then there's no point actually putting it in the global state. Because the more you add to the global state, generally it's not preferable to have things in the global state that don't need to be there for performance sake.
I was about to say it's so that bog things down because it's like stuff that kind of has to be loaded in memory or whatever, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, so list of tiny apps. Then should I do like this, CRPTS, which this is what we called our list in the draw.
Yes,
.io.
You could do like a unique thing. You could do like a unique code like that. I don't know if that's actually even necessary if we are recommending logsec, because we could just have everything be human readable and we'll know if we're referencing the same thing because we could just click on it and go to the note and then we can see everything. So we could do that. You'd probably be a better judge for whether that's a good idea than me. Does that make it more confusing or less confusing?
Okay, so scripts.
We could do like a unique code like that, and then maybe add some aliases, and then add like a 1 or 2 sentence description of what that is, or something like that.
Like in the page?
Yeah. Or we could just rely on the linked reference.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is I'm trying to figure out what I need to do to make sure that this is separate from my other notes. Like maybe I need to project devs who can't code. I guess this is all technically tagged with Tiny Apps app. Sort of.
Can you make a template for like devs who can't code files?
Yeah. I should just tag everything with TAA. This is my tiny app. As far as a template for devs who can't code, yeah. I don't think I'll need to do that right now. I'll have to think a little bit harder about that because this is a note template. But yeah, I could definitely do that. Okay.
And then on
so
my
we've got our scripts.
YouTube, I haven't uploaded
I think this is going to make it simpler
but
for me is to just reference exactly what's going to be in the code so that from my notes, I can go hunting in the code. Like I can think of this as language. You know, I can think of this as just like acronyms. You know, it's really easy to search through a document if I'm just looking for acronyms that are referenced for something. And I might not know what that code is. And I might not be able to read the code, but I can at least know this function is calling these things. And, oh yeah, SCRPTS, that's my list of tiny apps. And if I ever forget it, I can just click on it or type it in, go to the page, and then boom, these are all my references. And if I go to this, the one linked reference is right here. This is my list of tiny apps, the scripts that we want to execute. So I think this will work.
Yes. And then, yeah. I also am going to have like supplementary content too towards this because of my own project that I've been working on the whole time. I'm also turning that into a video series of like tutorial type stuff. So between the what you consider the best approach and then what I consider the best approach, hopefully people can look at these things and find something that is perfect for them.
Yeah, that'll work. That's good. I should actually go through all of that, your organization method myself, just to see kind of how that jives with the way
I don't have any
it.
content on that published yet, but I have been working on it the whole time. It's just hard. Making stuff is hard.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of things to work out, and you kind of have to think your way through all of the problems you're going to have, which is also really difficult just on its face if you don't know how to code. You know, so you don't know what problems you're trying to plan for or prepare for.
Exactly. Okay. That's why I'm saying it's ultimately the complexity is always going to come down to making data move around. So every time you have a global state, something that you think will be in the global state, make a link to it on its own note now. Even if you don't think it will be necessary, you might try to build out that component and find a whole bunch of issues and then go, oh, this is probably more complicated than I thought it would be. Thankfully, I already made that note and it's already referenced by everything. So I don't have to go and reread everything to make a new note that connects all the dots.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense.
Let's think about this in the context of the draw.io diagram that we had, which I can actually bring up real quick.
Yes. It might not even be all that necessary to even use draw.io yet if we just it depends on how good your personal...
I just want to use this as a way to ask about an element here. So this is the thing that we did in the last episode, right? So I wanted to ask, in the context of the global state and then the components tree, is like, let's say search for script is srch. That would be a component, right? There wouldn't really be anything relevant in the global state. So I would not be putting this in global state.
It would. The search bar for the global state, if you want to search for a script, you need to reference the list of scripts, which that is in the global state, which means that component will touch that data.
The scripts are in the... Yes. So you're basically, the component will be referencing SCRPTS. We'll be referencing the tiny apps. But I'm saying that the search itself doesn't need to be listed under the global state list. It needs to be listed under the components list, right?
Potentially. This is another scenario where I'd say it's a good idea to link that, give it its acronym, and link it in the global state list now. Because what you might want to do is have a drop down that when you start searching, it will just give you a drop down and show all the components that could be all the scripts that could match your search, which means that the text that you put into the search field would be text that needs to be accessed by other components.
Okay.
So when it comes to if there's a bit of data, do I need it in the global state? I wouldn't entirely rely on my intuition at first. As a dev who can't code, I would put it all in the global state as like a potential. And then once I'm done putting all the components on the paper and I have every little thing that I need in the component tree, if I click on that global state thing and I see only the one reference, it's like, okay, then it doesn't need to be in the global state. But if I see it referenced even twice, then I know that that bit of data needs to move between components. And the only way to get that done by copying and pasting when I don't really know how to code is by putting it in the global state.
Okay. So as we build this out, we just need to think about like what we've been referencing, and we're gonna have to come back to this global state constantly just to be like, oh, well, this should have been in the global state. We just referenced this 3 different times. Basically.
Yes.
The most important thing that you can do in order to secure your Bitcoin is to use a secure, trusted, long-running hardware wallet in the Bitcoin space, and do one that is Bitcoin only, like the Cold Card. Not only do they have the Cold Card Mark IV, which is the cypherpunk calculator, but they also now have the Cold Card Q, which has the large screen, has a full QWERTY keyboard, has a flashlight, and a QR code scanner. It is the cypherpunk BlackBerry of the Cold Card series. And if you are looking to keep your Bitcoin safe and you want all of those advanced features, you want to do some custom setup with multi-sig, you want security features for those edge case scenarios where you need a brick me pin or a dummy pin that opens up to a fake wallet, the Cold Card has it all. And if you don't want to complicate your setup or you don't need any of those advanced features, you can use it simply as a secure default Bitcoin signing device. Keep your seed, keep your keys off of your desktop computer, off of your phone, and securely and easily use your Bitcoin. If you do not have a Cold Card or you haven't even checked it out yet, go to coinkite.com. The link will be right in the show notes. And don't forget that when you are at your checkout, the code Bitcoin Audible, all one word, will get you a discount. That will also be right in the show notes in case you forget about it. Keep your keys safe and get yourself a Cold Card.
So yeah, there will be a bunch of notes created in this process, which might sound annoying, but I promise that'll make it so that no matter how big of a project you're making, it won't be overwhelming. Because you won't need to search through them.
Website references, like they're all links. And it does make sense too, because your app is going to be like this. Like every single time you want a component or you want a function done, you need a module. Like it's going to have its own little brick. So what you're trying to do is have a place where you reference all the bricks. So yeah, it's going to seem daunting that you have all of these different bricks, but you have to have all of those different bricks to build the house, and you need a way to reference each individual brick to put all this stuff together.
And I will also say that this is for a dev who can't code at all. And then once you get more comfortable with this process and you make this process work for you and you see it working over time, you can improve the efficiency of things by making more than one global state, making a global state that only gets loaded in per page and things like that. But that adds layers of complexity that if you're a dev that can't code and you just want to figure out how to use AI, you don't have to worry about that. You could just have this global state here that just keeps everything in memory. And then you don't have to worry about doing anything beyond copy and pasting. So it's not ideal, but it's work.
After we get to a point where this is large enough, we could probably split up the global state based on what part of the app you're in. And what's funny is that if we actually reference everything properly and we know what things are referenced at each, let's say like we're on the main window and only like 20 of the 80 things in our global state are being referenced in the main window. And then we go to another window and then we just look through and there's another 30 things that are referenced. Is that we separate those out into window 2 global state or something. So when we get to the point where this is starting to get, I mean, obviously 20 things is probably, not going to be where we have a problem. But if it gets to the point where it's large enough that actually matters for performance, is that we can actually separate those out based on where we are in the application.
We probably are going to have more than that, believe it or not, though, Guy. Because, like, think about your search question. Having a search bar means that you need a results page, and then in that results page, you need to have some kind of algorithm that checks for the string that you have, if that exists in any of the other apps. And then it needs to display a little tile thing for every single Tiny app. And then in each one of those tiles, there's going to be like a name and a picture, and it's going to link to a path. That's like four unique components where your intuition told you there'd be one. Mm-hmm. So these things will unfold to a degree that I think for people who don't have a lot of coding experience, it's going to be a surprising rate at which your idea unfolds into something bigger and bigger. But thanks to this method, it won't be overwhelming.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. All right, so should I just go through and list all of the other things for like scripts? Would it make sense to just put this in like a flat list where each thing, or should I have a hierarchical list? Like, so there's like scripts add, then, scripts remove, script details,
so
like that sort of thing.
To adapt this method, I think we could just say, for this method to work, you definitely need to use logsec or Obsidian or something like that. I think that's a good, because they're free. You can afford $0. So definitely use this. I'd say just
everyone can afford $0.
Yes, I'd say do SCRPTS, and then in the nested list, add all the other stuff about it. And then we'll figure out more things when we get to it.
You mean in the tabbed list?
Yeah, there's a difference between data and component.
Yeah.
So if we're gonna do
add a script to the list.
I wouldn't make that its own note yet. I mean, yeah.
You don't think so?
Probably. I'm not sure. We'll feel it out. Probably do that for now, and then if it's bad, we can remove it.
I can bulk replace and remove it. I was about to say I can bulk replace and change things as needed. So if we need to just put all this underneath the scripts page, then I think we won't have a problem doing that later. Remove base list. Then
Skippert.
We're gonna need script. So should each of the details of the script be separate items? Like we're gonna need file path. We're gonna need the description.
So I think
thumbnail, that sort of thing.
I think we should link to the add and remove functions from the scripts note.
Well, they should already be there, because
Is that going to show the whole sublist or a nested list? Yeah. I think so. The whole point is I want to try to build this out in a way where no matter how large the project is, this one index page won't be like, holy moly, what is this? This is so huge. I want to try to avoid leading novices into a situation like that, because that could be very like traumatizing.
Yeah. So basically we want to try to make this so that everything is like a page readable sort of thing. Is that what we're trying to do?
Or like a few pages. Like I would
Mhm.
consider this to be the appendix rather than the book. This main
Mhm.
page. So that's where my mentality is with this.
Okay.
With this main page. So all the complexity that comes inside the list of tiny apps, I would say should be linked from the list of tiny apps note.
All right. So it's so hard. It's so hard to just like think through and be like, what are the pieces of this damn thing?
Yeah, that's why.
Because I'm like, I
that's
got it
why
all.
I recommended.
I got tiny apps and I got a search index. But like,
I
I know
recommend
there's
like
like
a
a
spiral.
million things.
I recommend a spiral approach where like you put components when you think of a component, and then that will tie into the global state data. Like rather than completing one step and moving on to the next, I think you should iterate on all of them.
So, what do you mean by that? Exactly.
So instead
like
of
let's say
writing the
search
complete
index.
global
How
state
do you?
list,
Yeah.
sorry, instead of adding the complete global state list and then building out the component tree, I would say write out some of the obvious components, like the things that you know are going to be there, and then think about, okay, what's the data going to be like? Oh, I know that this component is going to need my name, and this component is also going to need my name. So obviously the name needs to go in the global state because more than one of the files that I'm copying and pasting are going to use that same bit of data.
Okay. All right. So in components, I'm basically building out the blocks here. So for blocks, I'm going to need a script detail block. Right?
Yeah, I'd recommend for the data, you want to use these abstract names, but
For the data? What do you mean?
I would consider looking at the components differently. So if you want to use the acronym naming convention for the data, I'd recommend using something different for the components. Like personally, I would just do a human readable name for the components.
Just do like a full out like
or
writing
detail block
like
or something.
Script detail kind of thing.
Yeah. Something that has to be unique. Maybe camel casing? Something to signify.
What's camel casing?
The first letter is of the first word is lowercase, but the first letter of every other word is uppercase.
Like that?
Yes, that would be camel casing. The point is to have this is a concept that I'm just copying over from actual programming. You want to be able to look at it and know instantly what type of thing you're looking at.
Yeah.
So if you see the all caps acronym type, you know that's data. If you see the camel case, you know you're looking at a component.
Okay. All right. So back to data, actually. I'm going to need the script description of the script. Yeah.
And that would be a part of the tiny apps.
It would be under tiny apps,
unless
I
you
guess.
don't. Yeah.
That's why I love this. Because
each one of the lists each one of the apps in the list of tiny apps is going to have a data point. That's the description.
Gotcha, yeah.
I think I want to stay within the realm of looking at the global state as just a bunch of JSON objects that will keep things streamlined. So when we have a list of tiny apps, that just envision a JSON object. Which even if you're a dev who can't code, I would recommend understanding the concept of a JSON object. That isn't too complicated, and it will be understanding it will make things much easier for you.
Window. So we probably reference the script window during search in our main list, which means that the script window would need to change based on filters and whether or not I have a search term, because the search will bring up the script window too, which will reference each of the script detail blocks. So how do I think about the filters? Is that a component? That's a component. Filter.
Yes, that would be something that affects components.
Shows in the list.
So I would recommend too, not getting too caught up in all the details. If you just like put every bit of data as its own acronym, you can just go down the list, and for each one, just put like in the node of it, just on the top, put like a human readable sentence for what it is. So that way, when you go through the list and you come back
like
to it,
right here, like so I go back
just
to
put
the
like
script
one
window
sentence
page
of just put one sentence of basically what it is, and then when you go down the list, when we're done, the last step is going down the list and like checking everything. Then once you have everything out there, you can start more thinking about how this data relates to each other. That could be another thing that you can consider doing, just to save yourself from getting overwhelmed.
Now I'll just come back to that. All right, window for list of script detail blocks. I'm just going to actually say just list of scripts. Filters. I think I'm going to reference that just in case, so I know what I'm thinking about. Let's see. I guess global state would just be appearance details. So background image or color. Let's just do background color. There's no reason to put an image yet.
Background images are really cringe. Yeah. I can't recommend using images for backgrounds on apps. Unless you want your app to look like a MySpace page.
Wait, nope. Actually, we're going to have a lot of colors. Color BG. I think color should be the master.
Now you're thinking.
Text.
Now you're thinking like a dev.
Color. Text. Window color. So underneath this, or let's say when I reference this, this could be a gradient, and I can have like a gradient, flat color, gradient or flat color. There you go.
I would also say what this is too. So like when you come back in a month, you mean like what windows are we coloring or something like that. This might not be the perfect example for that, but just in general, you're going to know what you're doing right now when you have all the same context in your brain, but it's very common for like newer programmers to underestimate how much they'll remember when they come back to something. So always put something that's human readable in case you forget, because you're going to forget about some of the stuff you write.
All right. Component list, let's say. So I need a drag and drop window for adding or executing scripts. Script add. No. Should each window be its own component? Should I think of individual windows or individual items or blocks as a component?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I should? Yes? Okay. All right, well, I'm just going to say window, drag. All right, well, if we're going to consider every single window or every, like, active block or whatever as its own component, I've got up here, I've got the window for the list of script detail blocks. And I've got it listed as script window. Should this be window scripts? Like, should I target window as kind of like its own thing?
I don't think it matters too much.
Okay.
Yeah, for subcomponents, I think
window for the active.
We'll just worry about that later.
Script. Window active. So the search function and the search display, search window are different things, right? They would be different
sort
things.
of. I think you'd want to be able to articulate what you want the algorithms to do, but the algorithms will live in components. So like, for the prompt for the search bar, you'd want to say that you want the search bar to be a text field that takes that text and looks through the list of tiny apps for matching keywords or a name or whatever, and display those. I would just I would tag that anytime you reference something that exists.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, okay.
Going back to the drawing, we need home screen, an add script window, file path, compatible files. Home screen. No.
And then like sidebar, or like however you want to navigate between pages.
That's a good idea.
Should be its own component.
Window or page for adding or editing a script. So we will need to edit these possibly. Sidebar for Navigation. Hmm.
I just call it a sidebar. Yeah.
Just straight sidebar. I was trying to list these. I was trying to treat it like category and then what it is. And like, so this would be home window, but I was also thinking like maybe main and then home page, but sidebar is pretty universal. So that would just
So the
always
thing
be a
is,
sidebar.
what we're building is a tree. So you want to think about the components on the most basic broad stroke level, but all of these components are going to break down into more components.
Okay.
So like if you have any other sidebars, the main sidebar in the page is probably like the unmarked one. It's up to you though. It's
Okay. We'll leave it as sidebar for now. Let's say I'm trying to hide the sidebar or hide an extra menu list. Actually, menu. I'm going to need a menu, settings menu.
well, wouldn't the settings menu be something that was shown in the sidebar? It'd still be a component, like a window, but in order to deal with navigating between pages, the easiest, most straightforward way to do it, is to have every window be its own like page, except for like the windows that will come up for a specific time in the app or something.
Mm-hmm. So settings page would basically be what I'm thinking of.
Oh yeah, it might be best
settings.
to specify page and window as two separate things. By the way, I should have
Page
said that
and window.
sooner. Yeah, I thought you were saying window as in for pages. Each page is definitely its own component.
That's kind of what I was thinking of, but then I was also thinking of like blocks inside of a window or a page. Maybe page is just a better way to reference it. Page is the better way to reference it because I'm not trying to have like a bunch of pop-ups here.
Well, generally, the approach that I would recommend is layout, page, and then the windows in the page. So the layout is unchanging.
So windows are
from the moment
sub-pages.
Yes. Windows are
drag and
things
drop
inside of
is a window.
pages. I would classify windows as things that exist within pages. There's going to be a layout, is how my recommended approach that will keep things straightforward. You have a layout that exists and is unchanging from the moment you open the app to the moment you close the app, with that has the main content and the sidebar. And the sidebar, you navigate through different pages, and the pages are basically all of the content next to the sidebar. But that layout is its own component. And then in that layout component, you have the sidebar component and the content component, and then the content is the pages.
Okay. Let's see. I still feel like there's got to be like 50 other things, but I keep having a roadblock. Like trying to figure out, okay, what else is going to be here? Like, okay, buttons for each of these different elements or pages. Is that a component?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
If I've got a button for the sidebar.
Mhm.
Is that an individual component outside of the sidebar itself?
I want to
Or
say
is that just a
yes,
module? Is
not
that just a
because I
block?
think that's the best approach for this particular project. I
Mhm.
just want to say yes because depending on what you're doing, that could be the best way to do it. So
Mhm.
we might as well show what that's like to treat it as its own component. Each
Okay.
part as their own component. So like you'd probably say sidebar item settings, sidebar item main, or things like that to denote each element in the sidebar. Just because sidebars, people often will want to put accordions inside the sidebar instead of just buttons. And for that, it might be best to break things out into their own component.
So should I name? Do you think it matters if I name it, or will it be relevant later to name it like button home or button active, like that sort of thing?
I would.
And
So
just
you're
having
using
one
the
for
term
each
button,
thing?
which has a specific meaning for like web design and stuff.
Okay.
I'd recommend sidebar button, like lowercase sidebar, uppercase button, and then home.
Sidebar
That's what
button
I would
home.
recommend. Yeah.
Okay. Sidebar button.
Actually, it might be better to use the name item. Sidebar item home.
Item. Okay. Okay, that's a good point. I like
Because
that better.
the sidebar items
item.
won't necessarily look or behave like buttons.
Yeah, I was just thinking. It seems it's a little bit odd, and I might not need it, might not want it as a button in a certain context. But then other times I might. For the settings page,
Designers generally look at things in the sidebar as a list, and so everything that exists in that list is an item.
Okay. For this is the Swan Bitcoin app, and this is how easy it is to just buy Bitcoin whenever you're feeling like it. And I feel like it right now. And as it shows me right here, I still have $9,388 worth of my $10,000 of Bitcoin buying that has no fees whatsoever. And now I have $10 more worth of Bitcoin. I do this quite often. One of the really great things about Swan is the incredible number of resources they have for learning and understanding anything that you want to know about Bitcoin. And importantly, they're going to teach you why you should not trade. They're not going to encourage you to trade. They are Bitcoin only. If you're looking for an easy and reliable way to get into Bitcoin, if you're looking to put Bitcoin in your IRA, if you're looking to put Bitcoin in your business, if you're looking to do anything around getting on a Bitcoin standard or getting exposed to Bitcoin in your portfolio, check out swanbitcoin.com/guy is my special link, and you will find it very conveniently right in the show notes. Okay, let's say I click on a script and I have a block come up and it's got my thumbnail, it's got my name, like I'm looking at let's say I'm looking at an audiobook or an item in Audible, right? Is that there's just a small window and it shows me the details, the author, the description, maybe even I can just look at the code. Actually, that would be really cool to just be able to like drop down and just like, this is the code for my script. So I can just like easily verify everything. And so I have these details and the file path as well. But I don't want it edited in the main thing. But I do want to be able to edit it. So I have an edit button and I click on edit this, or I click on add one and it gives me a blank one.
So this is This would be the
key or
type of
something like
thing
that.
where you could, in a few sentences, describe what you want, but to build it is very involved. So this is another instance where everything you say should, every component should link to its own note. That is absolutely something that is worth its own like note, and then putting that in a different page.
Okay.
If we put every little detail of every component in this appendix, it's going to become cumbersome.
Script. Okay. So
Yeah.
under sidebar items scripts, we'll have all of these details about editing, adding one, and what the individual components.
So when it comes to editing scripts and stuff, we aren't going to need any data in the global state beyond the path to the file. When we're going to read the contents of a file and edit the contents of a file, those would be like read-write operations that occur as needed. So basically what I'm saying is we don't need to read every app and put that in the global state. When you want to open up an app in like a text editor that exists in the thing, you do that as needed. Would be my recommendation.
All right. Help me out with the next step then. Should I start going down individually into these items and detailing more stuff out? Or should we look at...
So I think of it like from a top-down approach. So what that means is, imagine there's like this big invisible ant hill nest thing. You want to start at the top and slowly like work your way down to get into the details. So the appendix should have all the most basic stuff. And then it should link to all the most basic, abstract, higher level stuff, and then get more complicated in the weeds as you go along. So the appendix remains something human readable and a starting point. And then as you build out each thing, it might be like if you want to build a file editor, like a page where you open it up and it goes to its own page, you open up a specific script to see the text, and then you want to press an edit button to turn on edit mode. That could, even with AI, that would probably be its own episode. So I think for the sake of the appendix, which is like the index, probably we just say we want a page for editing scripts, and then we link that to a note, and then in that note, then we start to get into the details about how that would work. All that would need from the global state, besides like the color and all the theme stuff, is the path and the name of the file. That's all it would need from the global state. Anything beyond that would be things that we're reading and writing on the spot. We wouldn't want to store those. Like, we wouldn't want to store the contents of every file in global state when we could just read it when the user asks for it.
Yeah, of course. Okay, that makes sense.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. Now what I'm thinking of is, do we have enough here to build something really rudimentary?
Potentially. The thing is, when we build it, if it's not the whole idea, probably just going to mean we rebuild it later. Which I guess isn't that big a deal, but
I was about to say that's not that big of a deal. And I think we can learn too from building something rudimentary to coming back and being like, I think we could potentially learn more in building something in one way and then figuring out where it goes wrong and then going back to the base to build it again so that we don't run into that problem again. You know what I mean? Like, at least from my perspective, is I'm more of
But this is a lot of stuff to build a simple thing out of. Like if I want to take everything that we just typed and turn it into an app,
I would leave
when
some
I can't
stuff
code,
out. Like I don't think I need a search.
yeah.
Like I think right now all I need is a list and maybe even a way to manually add to the list. Like I have to edit a file or something to add something to a list. And how would execute work? Like is to run.
See,
the
this is where we get to the no free lunch thing.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, AI isn't at a point where you don't have to think about these things at all.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about executing files, when you don't know how to code, I think you'd say you need to think about the different file types that you'd want to support. So let's say just Node.js. You want to be able to execute Node.js files. I think we could do that. So maybe in your notes you want to say for the first like POC or something, you just want a list of Node.js files that you add, and then you can execute them with a button. No editing, no creating new files, just linking files that already exist. I would put the proof of concept somewhere else.
Somewhere else.
Okay. I'm just afraid that there's a level of impatience here that is going to shoot us in the foot and make things more confusing. Maybe make a new note that's like first POC, and then we just copy and paste what we think we can add from here. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Basically, we're going to build a micro version of our app, or a proof of concept version of the app.
Yes. All right. So this is what we're going to want to use. This should work.
Tiny apps POC.
This should be in working condition. Let me send this to you on Key.
Cannot stop coughing right now.
Yeah, because what we have here is the beginnings of the entire project. We created some stuff that, like, in this page, that's like some of it's simple, some of it's way more complicated than you think. And so if we take this whole page and we say this is the POC starter, we're just kind of like moving things around in a way that might end up being, I don't know how to explain, but like shoot us in the foot, make things confusing. So I think copying and pasting just the stuff that we need for the POC is probably the best way to handle this.
All right, I'm actually going to copy and paste the whole thing, and then we can just narrow down. I can just remove.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
What is not necessary. All right. So home screen, we do not need one for adding or editing a script.
I think we should look at it as adding a script that already does exist. When we bring in the idea of putting a file editor inside of this app, that is a lot more complicated than you'd think.
Well, I think it should just be done in like Sublime or whatever text editor, and then saved, and then add it. Like I think whatever we add, I think the complexity in being able to add an app should just be in being able to do it locally, where I have something that I wrote up in Sublime or Automator or something, and then I can add it to the app and execute it. Or I'm adding it via a key with a pair app or something that somebody wrote. So we're doing it over pair, which is down the road when we're talking about sharing things.
Yeah, for POC type stuff, just to like start using this method to start to understand the method itself, I'd stay away from hole punch tools altogether.
Yeah. Like I said, that's way down the road.
Yeah, but we can use
I
the
don't even think we
starting
need
code,
settings.
which
Settings
does run
are
in the pair runtime.
stuck. Yeah. No settings page. I am on the right one, right? It's POC, yeah. Sidebar for navigation. I don't even think we should have multiple pages. I think it should just be one page.
Mm-hmm.
So no sidebar. Main layout. Don't need a home page if we're not gonna. What is happening? Home screen. Search bar. Search. Page active. Drag and drop. Adding files. Actually, I need to change this because I'm not going to have a drag and. I don't think we need a drag and drop for the scripts, or if we do, we need to put it in a different location. For adding files or folders to execute in to work with, to use in a script or tiny app. And I'm going to change that.
I don't know.
Well.
I don't think drag and drop window was. We could try, I guess.
What?
We can try a drag and drop window, but I think that's going to be like the first thing we build with this method. I don't think that's a very good idea. I'd recommend just like you press to add a
for
new
the first
file.
method? No. I'm just updating this conceptually because I realized I made it for adding scripts, and I'm not really worried about whether or not we can add scripts with a drag and drop. I wanted to be able to drag and drop files into it that I'm working with, which is what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But for point of proof of concept, we don't need to do the drag and drop.
Yes.
Yeah, I was removing it from that. I was just realizing that I detailed it wrong in the main app. Script detail block. You know what? I think we should just deal with that with the title. I don't think we need that for a component right now. And we don't need a window for the list of script detail blocks either. We just need titles.
Mm-hmm.
Don't need a filter. Don't need a search index.
And we don't really need to specify a page if we don't have multiple pages either. So if you want to do this as like a single page thing, we don't need any page component.
Well, these are just referencing pages that already exist for the main app.
No, in the component tree.
You mean... Okay, just all of these pages we don't need because they're just the main layout. Is that what you're meaning?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Permanent main layout. Add a script. You'll still need to figure out something there. Description, thumbnail. Can't believe I didn't have a title for the script. We have construction going on. I'm sure you can hear that. No, whoops.
I don't think we should use this starting code. I think we should probably use create react app, just because getting started with this method, relying on as much open source code as possible is probably a good idea. I think there's some things that I'll say that just won't make sense until there's some experience. to reference. We might want to do just create React app as a starting point, just to build a one-page thing. So what components do we need here? A button to add file button. We need a component to display the files that we do have. Well, this button is probably actually just a button. Items are in reference to lists.
Okay.
And then for this file list, I would say, I would call that display files we have in list as like a file list. And then what else would you need? Run file button. That's funny.
A what button?
A run file button. Or like button run file. Oh, the list of tiny apps, that's gonna go through a lot of simplification. It will be a list, and all each tiny app will need is a path and a file name. And I think for this bare minimum, what do you want, Python or Node.js? We should assume they're all one language. Whatever you think. For scripts, probably Python.
I was about to say Python. Yeah.
Yeah.
And where would I put or designate that?
For the global state list, I would take out the add and remove file thing. Oh wait, no, I wouldn't. I would keep those. Those are.
We still need to add and remove somehow. It'll just probably change
but that's
over time.
depending on how we do it. That would be separate from the list. I would leave those though.
We shouldn't need thumbnail or description here.
So you have separate things here. I'm trying to think about how to explain this. Okay. Some of these things, like scripts path and script name, those are things that go into each attributes of each item in the list, which is fundamentally different from scripts add and scripts remove. Those are functions to be run over the list. So I don't know how to.
So should these be separate from?
That's what I'm saying. Function? I would keep the actions. I'd say
they would be components,
scripts,
wouldn't
they? No. This is the core of the problem for devs who can't code is state management. This is the one thing that we have to do it in a brute force, really simple way because it's kind of complicated. So for these actions, I would say scripts dash actions dash add dash rm.
Okay.
Yeah. That's good.
So what different types of things are we having? So like we've got like a random detail. We've got components, which are like visual things. They're like elements that we're working inside of, like different pieces of the thing. But then we have actions. Are those kind of like the three main things? There's like visual components.
I'm kind of trying to think about, I kind of want to say, delete the actions and don't worry about it. But it's one of these things that I think I'll refine this more as we go along. State management
feel like
is
actions should be their own thing, like a global state list, component tree, and then actions. Is that not right?
It might seem that way intuitively. The reality of state management is it's quite complicated. And it's like the main difference between like a junior and a mid to senior is understanding of it. I don't really know. I think we have to try this method, building things, and see how AI and you respond so I can have a better understanding. My initial plan was to just ignore that part and just assume that the AI would handle it. Maybe it's worth skipping now and then coming back to if we have something more complicated.
Okay.
And like, yeah.
So I'm going to change these. I'm going to take these and I'm going to remove them from our proof of concept and just put them back in the Tiny Apps app as a different list. Or as
that's something that
ones,
like I don't know how to explain it in words in a way that won't be really confusing. Mm-hmm. But if we come across a situation as we're building, then it would be easier for me to explain.
Okay. I'm not sure why this is not working.
I'm trying to think about this in terms of files. So when I'm just like, when I want different items in the list, I'm kind of thinking in terms of like files. Units of copy paste, basically.
This thing is super sluggish. Copy.
It's because the idea is so good. It's struggling to grasp it.
This is always what I worry about because this is what happened with Obsidian. And I don't know if it's just like loading a ton of stuff in like Markdown. And what's my activity monitor here? Let's see memory. So log sec. It's only using 111 megabytes. I don't understand why it's so slow. This is ridiculous. So much noise.
Is there something else throttling?
No idea. I'm going to try to copy again. Like, see, just highlighting that has like CPU 6.4, helper GPU, tons of stuff just pops up. 7.9%.
Oh, I thought, okay. So the way we're going to handle state management is in the simplest possible way with context API from React. So what that means is we're going to have a component that, like a React component, a file, not like a component, but like a file that stores all the global state. And then we're going to need another file that holds all the functions that we will call to change that state. So when I'm talking about actions, it's not entirely divorced from the global state, but it is going to be in different files. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, I think I gather, at least. So it won't necessarily be in our, the way we think about it, at least, won't necessarily, like, it will be a part of the global state potentially. But it will still be referencing a different location for them. Yeah.
There's our components that we physically see and interact with. And then there's the data that exists. The components just take the data and display it, right? But when the components want to change the data, and they need some functions. So the components call these functions, and these functions run against the data changes, and then all the components showing that data change. So like, I consider these the functions and the state sort of the same thing, but they exist in different files.
Okay.
I want to try to stay as much away from explaining how this stuff works. Because like for building apps, it's like one of the more complicated topics. But if we just stick to that method, it should be simple enough that it will just be copy pasting. So
okay. Well, then in that case, I believe are we at a place right now where we could start trying to look at building a React app with these pieces and just referencing the main layout from the draw, just like the home screen design, take the drag and drop out, search out, and just have the list, like just kind of a blanket list.
From a creating prompts to give to the AI perspective, I'd probably take out even the layout, because there's going to be a app file that is implied. That's the first thing that it's going to display. And so as long as there's no pages, there's no router and there's no templates either. So if we talk about the existence of a layout, it might throw off the AI and it might end up giving a result that's confusing. Whereas instead, if we just say we want to build a single page app with React, it's going to give you the app.js file, and it will just it could tell you where to put it.
Gotcha. Everything will basically just be an open thing with links, like a list of things and their links to them. So yeah, okay, that makes sense. All right then.
So add file button, list of files, and a button to run the files. So another thing that we're going to need, if we're going to do it this way, the simple way, we're actually going to need to add another thing into the global state where we're going to connect the button run. The button run needs to know which file is currently selected. And selecting a file is going to happen in a different component than the button. So we need to
what
put
if we have a different
selected
button for each file?
We could do that if we want to do that. Then we want to take out the run file execute script button, and that would be something that we want to put inside of the button file list. That hierarchy is actually quite important. If the button run is going to be something that exists inside of each of the button file list, we don't want to show the button run on the same level, because that's something that exists inside of the button file list.
Okay. So maybe just think about the interface here, is that if I had each of these things and I could just say run, then I could go down to each one, and in the background, it could basically start up a terminal window for each one. And what do you think? What do you think about the interface and kind of the user experience of this? Is like, should there be a run button literally next to each thing so that I can hit run, and then let's say it starts doing a spinny wheel or something, so I can see that this one is running right now?
So my experience with design always leads me to say we need the least amount of stuff on the screen as possible, which makes you inclined to say we should have one run file button. But in order to do that, we would need to add a new thing to the global state, which is currently selected.
Current selected file. Okay. The reason I wonder about the individual run buttons is thinking about how to manage if I want to run multiple at once, and how to show. How do I show? Like, let's say I have like one file. Like, I use that as an example specifically because I know this is something that I do quite a bit. Is I have my archive, my zip and archive app here on my dock, and then I also have my Whisper get a transcript of my episode file. So what I do is I will drag to one, and then I drag to the other, and they can run independently. They start their own little processes or whatever. And so I want to be able to run them in tandem. Like, it saves me a lot of time that I don't have to wait for the transcript to come up before I can archive the file. Good Lord. I don't know how bad this is, but I can barely hear myself.
Yeah. So I think I honestly think this might be a good
Maybe it just
cutoff
shows
point
up.
for this episode, because I'm thinking either we use the pair runtime, and this would be pretty simple, I guess. But I'd have to explain how to use the GPT and all that. Or we do the React thing, but if we do the regular React thing, in order to handle the file system, we need Node.js. And in order to do that in a standard React thing, we need to add an Express server. So I think to build this thing, it's probably better to use the Devs Who Can't Code starter. We could try to do that.
All right. I think it makes sense to do the run. Currently selected. Well, take your time. Selected script. This is under global state. So this would be. Would this be scripts current? Would that make sense to do it that way?
Yeah, I guess so.
We'll do it that way for now.
No. I wouldn't actually recommend that. I'd say current script or something.
That looks way too.
Because the thing about the scripts, when you say scripts dash something, you're implying that is an element within the scripts list, and the currently selected file is not an element within the list. It's a separate string. Is how I would look at it. Is probably the best way to do it.
Honestly, that was kind of a place we should stop anyway, because I feel like we were getting into where we were going to be building something, or at least trying to put together a proof of concept.
Yeah.
And so with that, let's close this one out. When we get into the proof of concept building, which will be on the next episode, do you still think we'll be running the starter app that you have built? Do you think we should start there?
1 second, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. All right, well, if we're going to start with the starter app, then I think definitely we save it for the next episode, and we'll have the link to that, or I guess we could technically have the command, but it's on a GitHub page. So if you want to actually look around and kind of see what we're going to be working from, you can go to that link right in the description. Of course, don't forget to subscribe and check it out so you can follow along as we build this out, and you can kind of see the whole process. Let's see, any other links or anything that we need to cover? I mean, shout out to the sponsors. Thank you to CoinKite and Swan Bitcoin for funding all of this mess. But any other links you can think of?
I mean, I'm working on something on the side that's completely different. I'm still working on that, and so I will be releasing more content soon. I have like a bunch of stuff recorded and all that. So if you want to look at my YouTube channel or subscribe to my Patreon or anything, it's a little bit different from this. It's more of trying to use AI tools and software to tackle current events and improve things in the long term. And then I also answer questions and I offer like personal counseling in terms of using AI. Like I will answer your questions and stuff like that. Other than that, no, I don't really have anything else to say. Oh, the GPT.
Yeah, GPT.
That's not. Yeah, I have a custom GPT. It's the first version of it. I will send you the link to that guy, and then I'll also send you the link for the GitHub. I don't think we should give everyone the first version of the GPT unless you want to. It's more of just like I've used it to make some tiny things, and its answers have been reasonable. Okay. I'm interested to see how it works at scale. I'm guessing I will end up having to tweak it and make improvements the more we go on. And so I'd definitely want to keep that updated for everyone else following along with us.
All right, sweet. Yeah, we'll maybe have the link. I'll tinker around with it, but send me that, and we'll definitely have the link to the GitHub page for the starter app. and then your Patreon and your YouTube channel for anybody who wants to go take a deep dive and start exploring there as well.
Yeah, which is
Awesome.
like somewhat related, but not entirely. I'm working on more of the same technologies, but a more specific issue.
Okay.
Or set of issues. So,
all right. Well, sounds good, dude. Thank you for putting up with the technical difficulties. Hopefully, I'll get this sorted out before the next one, and we will start putting some code to the note and seeing what we can build with this thing. I'm stacked, man.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Catch you later.
All right. See ya.